Welcome to my channel. I despise Mondays, thought Sergeant Roland Martin as his cell phone buzzed in his pocket. He hadn't even had a chance to take a bite of the first of the 3 chocolate cake donuts he had purchased during his initial coffee break of the week when that bothersome phone buzzed. Seriously, did someone for heaven's sake pass away? As it turned out, someone had. There's a body at 1492 Summer Avenue, Raleigh Lieutenant Steve Gray stated plainly. The dispatcher had sent a unit to investigate an open front door, and when the officer entered, he discovered a deceased person. You might want to finish those donuts, I know you have them, because the officer was inexperienced, and it was his first dead body. He ended up vomiting all over the carpet right next to and down the hallway when he attempted to rush out the door to avoid spoiling the crime scene further. Oh, and also on the porch, the rookie made a bigger mess than the actual perpetrator. Thanks for the heads up, Lieutenant Gray said with revulsion. Leslie Bingham, who had been overhearing the conversation, shoved half of a Boston cream donut into her mouth. For the 1000th time, Rayleigh noted how much his colleague resembled his wife's younger sister. We're done here, and I wouldn't bother finishing the rest. Drop the sweets and I'll grab the coffee. Meet me in the car, and I'll fill you in on the details. 2 patrol cars with their headlights on were stationed outside the house when the 2 homicide detectives arrived. One of the 4 officers was half-seated in the passenger seat of one of the cars, his face buried in a vomit bag. Tell that rookie he'll owe me for dry cleaning if I get my clothes stained with his vomit, Rayleigh said to the second officer standing nearby. Carefully stepping over a puddle of vomit on the porch, Rayleigh and Bingham cautiously entered the house and headed towards the bedroom where the corpse was found. Inside the bedroom, 2 more officers were covering their noses with handkerchiefs to shield from the stench emanating from the vomit. The deceased was Leonard Mallister, a 28-year-old unmarried artist who had been residing in this house for about 2 years after relocating from Portland, Oregon. A single shot to the back of the head, likely from a .222 caliber, fired at close range, probably by someone the victim knew and trusted, reported the senior patrol officer at the scene, Sergeant Bill Ford, a veteran cop familiar with his duties. It didn't appear that anything was stolen. His wallet was on the dresser, the TV was undamaged, and nothing seemed to be missing. And now, if you don't mind, we're going to step outside for some fresh air. Call us if you need anything else. Rayleigh nodded, and Bill Ford, along with the other officer, quickly exited the door. Bingham began photographing the crime scene while Rayleigh roamed the house. He was somewhat taken aback to find 2 kinds of shampoo and 2 kinds of conditioner in the shower, one set for men and one for women. In fact, he absently noted that one of the shampoo and conditioner sets was the same brand his wife used. Definitely a woman stayed here occasionally, he yelled to Bingham, as during further searches, a woman's comb and a bottle of perfume were found in the bathroom cabinet. Probably an older woman, judging by the perfume. I buy this for Sandy, and the girl at the store told me that almost no one under 40 buys it, he remarked, removing some light-colored hairs from the brush and placing them in a plastic bag for DNA analysis. He stored the brush in another bag so the lab could test for fingerprints. Rayleigh, having been on the job for 22 years, was proficient at his work. His instincts brought him back to the bedroom, where he started searching various drawers in the closet. He noted that one of the drawers contained some women's undergarments, and in the closet there were several articles of women's clothing, sufficient for a few days of changing outfits. There was an unattractive yellow tracksuit resembling that awful banana color his wife had worn around the house before she finally discarded it to end her husband's displeasure. Rayleigh stood still for about a minute and realized he had stopped breathing. When he looked at the tracksuit, he reached into the wardrobe, removed the suit from the hanger, and inspected it meticulously when Bingham interrupted his reflections. "Whoever she is, she lacks good taste," Leslie commented. "Yeah, whoever designed this ought to be reprimanded," Rayleigh quickly quipped to conceal his emotions. Rye returned the suit to the wardrobe. Noticing it was the exact size his wife wore, he felt the hairs on his arms rise. "Maybe you should step outside for a few minutes, Rayleigh. You look as white as a sheet," Bingham suggested. "Yeah, good idea. I'll be back in 5 minutes," he said, attentively watching his steps as he walked out onto the street, his mind swirling with countless thoughts at once. He was certain that what he had seen in the house marked the end of his 27-year marriage, yet he thought clearly enough to first verify the fingerprints. He would take an item of C's from home and hand it to the fingerprint experts before his shift ended. 27 years vanished in a blink, Rye thought bitterly. Damn, you loved her. She clearly didn't love you. Or if she did, it wasn't with much devotion. He felt a surge of nausea well up from his stomach's depths. He doubled over and vomited the remnants of last night's meal onto the ground. "I've never seen you do that before, Rayleigh, but I don't blame you. That was quite revolting," Leslie remarked, approaching. As Rayleigh felt ashamed of the vomiting, even if it wasn't for the reason Bingham assumed, he couldn't bring himself to discuss it with her at this moment, although they usually shared nearly everything about their lives. As he feared, Rayleigh received the answer he didn't want before his shift ended. He knew he had to disqualify himself from the case and went to see his commander. "I have a major issue," Lieutenant Rye stated as he entered the commander's office. "It appears my dear wife has been unfaithful with the deceased for quite some time, long enough for her to keep some clothes and other items at his place." Gray's head jerked up from the documents he was scrutinizing, as if propelled by a spring, and he gazed at his subordinate, mouth agape. Although Rayleigh had expected this reaction, he still blushed intensely. "I matched the fingerprints on the comb I found at his place with those on some of Sai's belongings from home. Bingo. She had clothes and other items there. Damn, I never had the slightest inkling. I guess tonight I'll discover how long this mess has been going on." "I'm sorry, Rye," truly Gray said. "Do you think she murdered the man? The ballistics test might not be complete until tomorrow. Bill Ford mentioned he believes it's a .22 caliber. Does Sandy own a .22? "Damn, she does. I'll locate it and bring it in later. If it turns out to be that .22, you guys can breathe a bit easier," Rayleigh said. "Do I think she killed the man? If you'd asked me yesterday, I would have said there's no way she could harm anyone, but I also would have claimed there's no chance she could ever betray me. Clearly, I'm a total fool, boss. You know we have to interrogate her. Do you want me to dispatch a couple of uniformed officers to your residence, or will you escort her in yourself? I think it would be best if I handle it, boss, although it may take some time. We need to discuss a few things," Rye responded. Sandy was surprised when she pulled into the driveway and saw her husband's car already there. This was an unusual occurrence, and typically only happened if she was delayed at her job as a real estate agent. She found her husband seated at the kitchen table drinking a cup of coffee. "What a pleasant surprise. You're home early for a change," Sandy remarked as she entered the kitchen. "Let me slip into some sweatpants, and I'll start preparing dinner. Did you love him, Sandy?" "Did you love Leonard Mallister?" Rye inquired, his voice barely louder than a murmur. Sandy halted abruptly, her shoulders stiffening noticeably. She felt as though her husband had struck her from behind. Her initial reaction was to flee, but her feet felt as if they were stuck to the ground. It took her a few moments to turn around and face Rye, yet she couldn't muster the courage to meet his eyes as she croaked, her usually clear soprano voice now rough as sandpaper. "I guess I developed feelings for him." "I'm sorry, Rayleigh." Her eyes brimmed with tears as they finally met his, and she could see the profound hurt in the eyes of the man she had married 27 years earlier. With unsteady legs, she walked over and sat at the table beside her husband. "How long has this been happening?" he whispered sharply. "About 2 years. I showed him a few properties when he moved here, and things just naturally progressed," she answered. 2 whole years? It just happened." He echoed softly, his voice laden with sarcasm, "like you were showing him a house and suddenly all your clothes came off and you accidentally fell onto his damn tool. Sure. That sounds plausible." The woman began to scrutinize the wooden surface of the table intently. A posture of avoidance as her husband had never spoken to her this way before. She felt the urge to weep but was suddenly fearful of how he might respond. "We would sometimes meet during the day, or in the evenings when you were working late. His schedule was quite accommodating, and you know most of my hours are flexible," she explained. "His schedule isn't so accommodating anymore, Sandy. He's in the morgue now with a bullet in the back of his head, and you're the prime suspect," Rye stated, having to grasp his wife's hand to prevent her from slipping off the chair when her eyes rolled back and she fainted. He lifted her from the chair and carried her to the sofa in the living room, as Sandy regained consciousness. Sobbing, Rayleigh stood close by. He observed that her fainting seemed genuine, but so had her act of being a devoted wife for the past 2 years, while she was involved with another man. "You know I didn't kill him. You know I couldn't do something like that, don't you, Rayleigh?" she implored. "Until this morning I would have agreed. But if you could betray me for 2 years, I think you're capable of much more," he retorted. The tears flowed more intensely as Rye scoffed, his anger mounting. He had so many questions he hardly knew where to start. "When was the last time you saw that jerk, Sandy?" he demanded. "Are you going to question me as a suspect in our own home?" she replied, her voice wavering with uncertainty. "At this point, yes, because I refuse to appear utterly clueless when we get to the station." "Now answer my damn question, you traitor," he snapped. She flinched again at his harsh words. "We were together last Friday night while you were at work, but he was very much alive when I left around 11. Why would I kill him? Why did you cheat?" She grimaced but remained silent as the seconds passed. Rye realized she might have considered it more a rhetorical question. "No, I'm serious. Why did you cheat?" "I'm not completely sure, Rayleigh. The kids were away, you were working long hours. I felt like I was aging. One day he came into the office looking for real estate. He was attractive and charming, and he began to flirt. I should have stopped it, but maybe I was too flattered that a man just a bit older than our kids was interested in me. We had several lunches and dinners, even toured some houses, and when we found the right house, we celebrated in the bedroom. Deep down, I knew it was wrong, but it felt so right. It seemed almost separate from us. And in a way, it stayed that way. And you know, being a younger man, most of the time she trailed off, her voice fading as she glanced away, recalling the moments. "Where's your .22 caliber, darling?" he asked abruptly. "It's where I always keep it, on the top shelf of my closet, under a few scarves." "You know that," she rasped. "Sit down, I'll get it," Rayleigh said, rising to his feet. He returned shortly with the gun, enclosed in a plastic bag. She looked startled. "What are you?" she began, but he cut her off. "This gun has been fired recently." "What the hell?" he exclaimed. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "Get in the car, Sandy. It's time to go. Call Bob Leacher on the way there." Sandy sat in the passenger seat as Rayleigh drove to the police station. She could feel the waves of anger emanating from him. "You have clothes and toiletries at his place," Raleigh hissed about 10 minutes into the silence. "Were you planning to leave me for him? Damn it, you decorated his kitchen and living room just like ours." "I never really thought about that, honestly," she replied quietly. The rest of the drive was silent. When Raleigh turned off the engine, he looked at his wife again. "One more thing I need to know, baby. Were there others?" She couldn't utter a word, but she shook her head. Raleigh led his wife to the commander, then walked away. "Wait, where are you going, Raleigh?" she asked. "He's now removed from the case, Sandy. You're a suspect, so he can't be involved," said Lieutenant Gray. "But you know me, Steve. You know I'm not a killer," she pleaded with her husband's boss, who was also an old friend. "I'm sorry, Sandy. Call your lawyer right now." Gray instructed, "Then Detectives Paulson and Zambrano will take you in for questioning." "They won't ask you anything until your lawyer arrives," Gray said. Raleigh accounted for his time over the entire weekend, including a few hours on Sunday afternoon when he was watching baseball with Gray and 2 other officers at Gray's house. At that time, Sandy was supposedly showing a house out of town. The detectives questioning Sandy soon discovered that her last statement was false. Sandy had waited for 2 hours for the people who had scheduled the viewing to arrive, but all she got was 2 hours of reading the Sunday newspaper in her car, sipping coffee. By the time she returned home, Raleigh was at Gray's house watching baseball, so she couldn't account for about 4 hours. "So you don't have an alibi for Sunday," Zambrano said. "Did you at least mention this to your husband?" She looked indignant but shook her head. Unfortunately for Sandy, the quick work-in. The lab worked against her. The bullet retrieved from the victim matched C's gun exactly, and it was determined that Leonard died on Sunday afternoon, precisely during the time when she had no alibi. By noon on Tuesday, she had gone from simply being held in custody to being arrested. Raleigh's life went from good to terrible in less than 48 hours. Although he didn't want to do it, he decided that he needed to tell his children what had happened. Both seemed upset that their mother had cheated on him, but neither believed that she could actually kill her lover. They were also disturbed that Raleigh wasn't 100% convinced that she wasn't a murderer. "Dad, it's Mum. You know better than anyone that she couldn't kill someone," said the elder, 24-year-old Jack. "Don't be petty." Dad, his 21-year-old daughter Ellie, a graduate of Ohio State University, scolded him. "Sure, it's awful that she cheated on you, but you can't really think Mum could kill someone." Raleigh felt betrayed by his children's casual attitude toward their mother's 2-year affair. Raleigh knew that legally he couldn't prevent his wife from returning to their home after she posted bail, but while she was in jail, he moved all her clothes to the guest room. He briefly considered moving to the guest room himself, but decided to stay in his own bed and make his cheating wife sleep elsewhere. "You're the one who had an affair, so I'm staying in my bed," he said irritably when she began to argue with his decision. The couple lived separately in the same house, barely speaking and not sharing meals. Sandy's attempts to apologize were largely ignored. "I'm sorry for everything, Raleigh, really. I still love you. I still have feelings for you," Sandy said one day. "You're only sorry that I found out," Raleigh replied. "You slept with him for 2 years. You deceived me and lied to me for 2 years. For God's sake, you fell in love with this guy. How can you possibly care about me, feel sorry for hurting me? Maybe I was an ignorant, gullible fool. But I've pulled my head out of the sand. You can't do what you did to me and still tell me you have feelings for me, maybe pity, at best. I have no idea if you killed him, but you certainly killed me, you adulteress." At Sai's request, the children came home for a couple of weeks. They were shocked by their father's cold treatment of their mother. "Dad, Mom is going to be tried for murder, and all you can think about is that she cheated on you." Ellie spoke emphatically. "I think you should set the affair aside until the trial is over and then focus on your marriage. She might end up in prison for a long time." "Dad, doesn't it bother any of you that the man she cheated with is the one who got killed? I can't just overlook that she betrayed me for 2 years, kept clothes at his place, and she loved him, and it really seems like she murdered him a lover's quarrel." "I don't know. But her issue with him is also her issue with me? Am I expected to just blindly support her after she's been unfaithful for the past 2 years? Damn, if he hadn't been killed. She probably would have left me for him eventually. And we're not even discussing the cost of a murder trial. At least that will reduce the amount I'll have to split with her in the divorce. The cost of a lawyer, God, Dad, who knew you were such a selfish pig," Jack shouted at him. "It's not about the money, it's about everything: the betrayal, the lies, the deceit, her sex life, the fact that she slept with another man for 2 years because he sweet-talked her when she felt old and vulnerable. My words didn't mean a damn thing to her. But this young bastard talks nicely to her and she sleeps with him for 2 damn years," Raleigh exclaimed a few days later. Things kept worsening for Sandy. Paulson and Zambrano discovered that Leonard had apparently taken on 2 more lovers after he started seeing Sandy. This gave her a strong motive for murder, though both detectives had to concede that she seemed devastated when they informed her about their findings. "He wouldn't have done that to me," she whispered quietly, her eyes filling with tears. "He loved me. He told me that many times. I told him I loved him." Raleigh sank into despair when he heard her reaction to this latest news. This guy must have been really good, really smooth. It was almost like he had 3 separate lives, Paulson said to Raleigh. He started sleeping correction, having sex with Sandy about 2 years ago, added 25-year-old Cara Carter about 14 months ago, and 32-year-old Donna Fisher about 8 months ago. They're both pretty little things, too. Sorry about that, Raleigh. Raleigh knew that Paulson and Zambrano were good detectives, probably the best in the department after him and Leslie. He knew that if there were any evidence to be found, Paulson and Zambrano would find it, which they did the next day after conducting a more thorough canvassing of the neighborhood. They spoke with a nosy resident who provided additional information. Helen Abernathy told the detectives that over the past 2 years she had seen Leonard's girlfriend at his house dozens of times. She was of average height with shoulder-length blonde hair, a seductive figure, and was pretty as far as Helen could tell from 3 doors down. The last time Helen saw her at Leonard's house was on Sunday afternoon, right after lunch. The 2 detectives knew Raleigh's wife. Helen Abernathy's description of Leonard's girlfriend matched her perfectly. The new information was that she had been at his house on Sunday afternoon, which coincided with the time of the murder. Although Raleigh was suspended and not involved in the investigation, Gray included him in Paulson and Zambrano's briefings out of courtesy. Raleigh sat almost frozen as the pair recounted what Helen Abernathy had told them. "Damn," he whispered when they finished their report. "She had motive, means, and opportunity." The other 3 men in the room quietly nodded in agreement. "Even though I had doubts about whether she was really capable of killing someone, this looks really bad, gentlemen," he said during another interrogation. Sandy again denied seeing Leonard on Sunday afternoon. "I told you I was waiting for a showing. They never showed up. I sat in my car and read for 2 hours before leaving," she insisted angrily. "Then how is it that one of Mr. Leonard's neighbors saw you at his house on Sunday afternoon shortly after noon?" "She's mistaken. "I wasn't there," she retorted, confident that the neighbor must have misidentified her, despite knowing exactly what she looked like, having seen her over the last 2 years. "She picked your photo out of a lineup," Zambrano said. "No, no, no, this can't be happening," Sandy Reed responded. Sandy was terrified when she returned home. Her lawyer had explained to her what a murder conviction would mean, and unless the police suddenly found evidence pointing to someone else. "Seriously, Raleigh, I didn't kill that two-faced jerk," she wailed. "I didn't know he was cheating on me. You know I couldn't kill." She suddenly stopped ranting, realizing that she had been doing the same thing recently. It was clear that Raleigh no longer trusted her, and she understood that she no longer deserved his trust. Raleigh hadn't missed the fact that her view of Leonard had shifted from love to something much less when she learned that she was just one of several lovers the artist had. Love can be so fleeting, he thought to himself. Raleigh and Sandy had been living like strangers for several months, cooking their own meals, doing their own laundry, and rarely communicating, even when the children visited. Raleigh mostly kept to himself. It didn't take a genius to realize that Raleigh's relationship with his children had deteriorated almost to the breaking point, as they continued to insist that he needed to accept their mother's infidelity and unconditionally support her during the trial. "I hope neither of you ever has to experience this kind of heartbreak," Rye told the children during one argument. "I gave her everything for 27 years. At some point, my love wasn't enough for her, and she found someone else but apparently couldn't figure out how to tell me or get rid of me." The wheels of justice turned slowly, and it was about 9 months before Sandy's murder trial began, but it took only 5 days for the jury to return a guilty verdict. Sandy sobbed uncontrollably in the courtroom. Several rows behind her, Raleigh sat passively. It had been a lifetime since they both said, "I do," in a small church in front of about 100 people. What went wrong, he thought to himself. "I thought we'd grow old together, rocking our grandchildren, maybe even great-grandchildren, on our knees. Did I ever really know her?" Sandy was the sweetest girl he had ever noticed when, one Saturday after a night of heavy drinking in his senior year of college, he spotted her in the Greasy Spoon Taco Diner. It was the kind of place you'd go to shake off a brutal hangover the next morning. She had long blonde hair, and her tight jeans really accentuated her figure. Given that his vision was a bit blurry from all the alcohol, he knew he needed to get closer to see if she was as beautiful as he thought. "Wow, you're really gorgeous," Raleigh said boldly, eyeing the woman from head to toe. "Excuse me," Sandy Nesbitt said, turning to face the obviously intoxicated young man. The 3 other women with her also turned toward him, but none of them looked very pleased. "Oh, damn, did I say that out loud?" the young man asked with a sheepish, drunken grin. The girl to the right of the goddess stepped forward and raised her hand threateningly. "How about you leave before I kick you so hard in one place that all your kids will be disabled?" She snapped at him. "Because I told the truth about your friend?" "Oh wait, she's your girlfriend?" "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you," Raleigh said, swaying. "What? No, she's not my girlfriend, but she is my friend, and you're just being a rude drunk. Now get out of here." One of the guys who had come with Raleigh approached at that moment, having heard the exchange. "I'm sorry, is Raleigh bothering you? Whatever he said, he regrets it. He's had a bit more to drink than usual," the friend said. "Wait a minute, I'm not that drunk," Raleigh insisted. "But she is really beautiful." Rye pointed at the blonde. His friend looked at her, then nodded in agreement. "Yes, she is, but it's time for us to go," he said. "I'll go, but I need to get your phone number," Raleigh said to the blonde. The blonde woman studied the young man. He was over 6 feet tall, appeared fit and handsome with bright blue eyes. She hesitated for a moment, then told Raleigh to extend his hand. She took a pen from her purse and wrote her phone number on his palm. "I'm never going to wash this hand again," he mumbled. "At least not until you call her first," his friend added. Sandy wasn't sure if Raleigh would even remember talking to her, so she was a bit surprised when he called her the next day. Although he hadn't made much of an impression on her the previous night, she remembered that he seemed smitten with her in his drunken state. The night before, she had confessed to her friends that she found him appealing, and honestly, what girl can resist a cute guy who's willing to make a fool of himself to impress her? She agreed to go on a date the following Friday night. They became close on their 4th date. They got married about a year later. Like any couple, they had their ups and downs, but Raleigh never suspected that his wife was discontent with him or their marriage. He wouldn't have been happy if she had said she wanted a divorce, but at least it wouldn't have been a betrayal, and she wouldn't have had to cheat on him for 2 years. Raleigh thought this, yet he knew Sandy better than anyone in the world, and deep down he had a lingering doubt that this woman could have harmed someone. However, his doubts didn't matter. The evidence pointed to Sandy. After what she had done to him over the past 2 years, he decided that he wouldn't lose a minute of sleep worrying about what might happen to her. As far as Leonard was concerned, karma did exist. He smirked to himself. Raleigh was reinstated to field duty after his wife's trial, and he and Leslie were partnered again. About a year later, they were sitting in a diner during their lunch break. Raleigh watched Leslie nibble on a bun and, for the 1,000th time, noticed how much she resembled the woman who had become his ex-wife 4 months ago. "Why did you kill him?" Les Raleigh said, slightly louder than a whisper. Leslie didn't miss a beat in her chewing. She had figured it was only a matter of time before Raleigh would figure it out, and she wouldn't disrespect him by pretending to be clueless. "I was only going to hurt him a little, but then he started talking and saying all kinds of crap about you. I gave him a chance to take a shot at you verbally, so I took the second shot literally." Raleigh decided they needed to finish this conversation in the privacy of his car. He waited about 30 seconds before Leslie began, her voice slightly trembling. "I found out that Sandy was cheating on you about 2 months before I broke up with him," Leslie said. "I was debating whether or not to tell you. I knew it wouldn't be good for you or for him, so I finally decided to confront that bastard myself. I was just going to try to scare him into ending it with her, but he didn't take the hint. Then he started mocking you." He said that he and Sandy laughed all the time about her idiot husband. He said he wasn't afraid of you and had no intention of stopping. "So I shot him just like that. I used the spare key to your house that you gave me years ago to get Cy's gun from the hiding spot you told me about. I really didn't plan on killing that jerk, but I wasn't going to use my own gun if it came to that." "So was it you or someone you know who arranged the Sunday house showing for Sandy that fell through?" Raleigh asked. She nodded and gave him a sideways smile. "Can I tell you something else?" Leslie asked. It was Raleigh's turn to nod. "I love you, Raleigh. I have for several years, but I never intended to act on it until your foolish wife messed up. Now, well, I'd like to be considered a candidate for the open spot in your bed in your heart," she said. Raleigh looked surprised. "You know, for a smart guy, you're really oblivious, Raleigh." They both sat silently in the car for about a minute. "What now, Raleigh? Are you going to take me into custody, or should I turn myself into the police?" Rye paused. "So let me see if I got the facts straight," he finally said. "The man who seduced my wife is dead. My ex-wife, the cheater, is in prison for life, and the woman who loves me is sitting in the seat next to me. I'm satisfied with how things are. Let's just keep this between you and me." Leslie beamed at Raleigh. He smiled back at her, started the car, and they drove off. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of Cheating Stories. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye. Goodbye.